I really can't think of a game that I was very disappointed in when it came to what was expected versus what was delivered, outside of Final Fantasy 15. Final Fantasy 15 unfortunately was one of those games that I was very disappointed in, and that's because the game originally was something called Final Fantasy Versus 13. Yes, Final Fantasy Versus 13 is not the same as Final Fantasy 15. Though they borrowed elements from that game, there were a lot of differences, and I'm gonna actually dive into that. This is the Final Fantasy game that was, well, never made, and unfortunately we got something else. But before we get into that, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, as well as follow us over at Twitch. The goal for YouTube is to hit 750 subscribers before the end of February, and overall goal being 1,000 subscribers by the end of March. Every little bit does count, as well as share the channel. That does help out a lot. But without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about Final Fantasy Versus 13. Final Fantasy Versus 13 was first announced in 2006, and it was going to be part of the Final Fantasy 13 mythos known as the Fabula Nova Crystallis. I believe I said that right, which was basically a trilogy of Final Fantasy 13 games. There was Final Fantasy 13 itself, Final Fantasy Versus 13, and Final Fantasy 13 Agito, which was later changed to Final Fantasy Type 0 or Type O. Of the three, the one I was very excited for was Final Fantasy Versus 13. And the main reason was because it was being developed by Tetsuya Nomura himself. For those of you who don't know who Nomura is known for the Kingdom Hearts series. And I really loved Kingdom Hearts, especially at that time. I was a really huge Kingdom Hearts fan, and honestly, I was just super hyped when this game was announced. There were a lot of interviews at the time where Nomura was stating that this is going to be a more realistic take. Thus, the little term that they always use in their trailers, a fantasy based on reality. The other thing that he always mentioned was that if Kingdom Hearts was more of a, not cartoony look, but more of a fantasy based look and more light-hearted, Final Fantasy Versus 13 was going to be a little bit more darker tone and more realistic, and I was super hyped for that. The basis of Final Fantasy Versus 13 is very similar to what we got in Final Fantasy 15. You have a character called Noctis, Lucis Calum, which is basically who we have in 15, but the overall arching goal and how the story unfolded was very different. For example, the story would start off in the kingdom of Insomnia, where Noctis is based out of, and basically you would go ahead and start with the attack on the city, or the country, or the kingdom, whatever you want to call it. You will start with that attack and move on from there. You would get to see a lot of the events unfold in real time. When 15 came out, unfortunately, they removed that whole section and turned that into a movie, which, yeah, they probably shouldn't have done that, and that was a big disappointment. The weird thing about that is there was already a lot of footage of gameplay with Noctis fighting in the city with his party members, and it was just kind of awkward. There were so many things going on and so much gameplay footage in the city that it made no sense to remove that whole part of the game. Basically in 15 you start off, well, already on your journey. You're outside the kingdom, where while the attack has not happened yet, you are already outside there, and really you just hear about it while you're on your adventures. Where 13, everything was going to unfold. Not only that, in Versus 13 you can see that Noctis seemed to be a little bit different compared to other protagonists. He was definitely a little bit more darker tone, and I would say he was, I don't know, more mature. You can see him standing, or for example sitting on his throne, where he's just kind of like chilling. He's just chilling there, going about his day, and then of course soldiers are ready to attack. He walks out there and just starts destroying these soldiers, and that was super cool to see at the time. It was very similar to Lightning, where there was the first glimpse of gameplay when it came to Final Fantasy 13, where Lightning is going through and fighting soldiers. Similar to that, except that there was blood, right? This was the first time they actually showed blood in a Final Fantasy game. Of course, when the actual game came out, there wasn't really any blood, but it was kind of cool to see that more mature themed Final Fantasy game. The other thing that was a little bit different, rather that was changed altogether, was the female, I don't know if you would call her a protagonist. She really wasn't a protagonist, but she was going to be a very important part of the story. In 15, we have Luna Freya, who's basically Noctis' love interest. They're kind of set up to get married from the get-go, and you really don't see that relationship. To me, at least, it just felt kind of weird. It felt like force, and it felt like, again, they just added that character later on, where you were originally going to have Stella, and Stella seemed to be like somebody that maybe took interest in Noctis, but there was some conflict going on. As we can see in some of the trailers, Noctis and Stella looks to face each other and getting ready to fight, and that was something very interesting. I remember reading interviews back in the day where Nomura was stating that yes, that Stella has similar powers to Noctis, because basically Noctis had a near-death situation and he was just granted some extra powers that nobody else had, but Stella also had those same exact powers, but it was almost reversed. When Noctis goes ahead and pull out his weapon, you can see a blue glyph, where Stella has a more yellow glyph. Not only that, one of Stella's eyes does glow up, similar to Noctis, where we can see him when he's fighting the soldiers, it glows red. So that was a very interesting take, and it was something I've always wondered, what was going to be the connection between these two? What is exactly going on? Now, while they did borrow elements from Versus 13 and put them in 15, again, it wasn't really executed great. Luna Freya just to me seemed kind of, meh. Like, she was like Yuna, but not Yuna. She was, it was just a lot of weird things going on, and it just didn't care about her. And they would always show her there, and they showed some flashbacks. Yeah, but I just did not care about Luna Freya. If anything, I really cared about Gladio and Prompto and Ignis. I mean, they were really core to the team, and you spent so much time with them that literally the focus was really on them, and that's really what I liked. But what was surrounding them just kind of didn't matter. The other things of Final Fantasy Versus 13 that I think was going to be a huge highlight, again, is just showing Noctis become the king. While 15 does kind of show that in a sense, I think Versus 13 shows it better. Again, the whole fight in the city of Insomnia looked to be amazing. You can see like a king behemoth, or maybe something similar to that, maybe some variation of a behemoth. They're walking around the city and you having to fight it. Aranea was introduced in a Final Fantasy Versus 13 trailer and was actually fighting Noctis in the city, which was pretty awesome looking. Honestly, that fight would have been better, I think, if it took place in the city versus where it took place in 15. And of course, being able to switch your party members. Though that feature I believe was added later on in the DLC. I don't know because I haven't beat all the DLC. I kind of like dropped off of 15. But it was kind of cool when they showed off the combat ability. It did look very similar to Kingdom Hearts, and there were some iterations. If you look at all the trailers, it does change over time, but it was very similar to Kingdom Hearts in terms of the menu setup, and on the right you had like the character portraits with their HP and MP and so forth. But the ability to swap between party members was pretty huge. We've all complained about Final Fantasy 16 not being able to swap party members, which is kind of a big deal, and yeah, like, even though it didn't really affect me, I do understand that, and I think it was a little bit, I don't know, Versus 13 being able to do that just looked a lot cooler. For example, if you wanted to swap to Prompto, you would use the gun almost like a third person shooter. It seemed a little bit more similar to something like Dirge of Cerberus, the way the gun was handled in that game. Of course, you can switch to Ignis or Gladio as well, and they all had unique abilities. I thought that was pretty cool. Not only that, the way Noctis handled was also a little bit different. In 15, they just went with this one button press setup, which was kind of weird altogether. I don't know why they did that, where you can see in Versus 13, it was not supposed to be that way. Not only that, you were able to swap through buttons on the fly. When you really look at the UI and the elements of this UI, it looks like a lot of these elements that were put in this game were then borrowed and put into Kingdom Hearts 3. For example, being able to swap through 3 different keyblades. The menu system they have there is very similar to what Versus 13 looked like. Now, there's some false information out there when it comes to this game. The biggest one being that Square Enix was upset at Nomura and said he was taking too long. But you really had to understand what was going on. This is 2006 when the game was announced. Nomura was working on Kingdom Hearts 2. And guess what? Really think about it. How many other Kingdom Hearts games came out in that time while Versus 13 was in development? Quite a bit. We had Birth by Sleep, right? There was also Rechain of Memories, even though it was a remake, did come out later on. We also had, what else? 358 over 2 that came out. Of course, there was Kingdom Hearts 3. Dream Drop Distance. Man, I don't know why I can't say that. Kingdom Hearts 3D. We'll just say Kingdom Hearts 3D. And then of course we had Recoded, which was the one that I don't really like. But we had all those games come out that were made by Nomura in that time frame. Not only that, Nomura's team did help out also with Final Fantasy 13, 13-2, and also Lightning Returns. So he was kind of all over the place, helping out where he can. And to me, that's just not fair when you look at Nomura. Nomura was definitely doing a lot of things at the time while working with Versus 13. So they were utilizing Nomura pretty hardcore, and he was all over the place. And honestly, I can understand why either A, he got overwhelmed, B, why it was taking so long. There was also engine changes, so you had to go from what the Final Fantasy 13 engine was to the Luminous engine, which Luminous engine wasn't that great to begin with, but he had to go ahead and help develop that while also doing the game. There was just so much going on there. The other thing that a lot of people get mad at Nomura's their storytelling. They were saying that the whole story disaster in 15 was Nomura's fault. That is not true at all. A lot of people like to compare the Kingdom Hearts mess to this. Kingdom Hearts story is not really a mess. Just because it's spread across different games doesn't mean it's a mess, right? I don't hear anybody complaining about the Marvel Cinematic Universe being a mess because you have to watch all these other movies to kind of understand Endgame, right? Nobody goes and watches Iron Man 1, 2, and 3 and then goes to Endgame and it's like, oh wow, this story makes no sense. At least I haven't heard anybody say that. Really, you have to go ahead and watch those movies and then to kind of get the overall understanding of what is going on here. Not only that, you have Civil War, right? If you never watched like Captain America Civil War, you would never understand why Spider-Man is there to begin with, because characters are introduced in those movies appear in, of course, Infinity War and Endgame. And Kingdom Hearts is very similar, right? You have to play Kingdom Hearts 1, Kingdom Hearts 2, Chain of Memories, and so forth to kind of get an overall understanding of what is going on in the Kingdom Hearts universe. Each game is very important to the story. And if you play all of those, you would understand the story. And I honestly like that way, like the way that he does his storytelling. It's shared across different games. There's a lot of mystery to it, and it always makes you want to know what is going to happen next. We always got those secret endings that were pretty awesome in Kingdom Hearts and so forth. The trailer design, honestly, for all of Final Fantasy Versus 13 always showed those mysteries. And that's what really had me hooked. Every time a new trailer came out, I was like, wow, I wonder what this is. I wonder what that is. There were always a trailer that was basically asking questions and asking you these questions, and you were trying to find out the answers to. From everything that we understood about Versus 13's story, it seemed to be very, very interesting, right? Noctis, Last Crystal in Insomnia. We knew Stella was going to be an antagonist. There was also the Warring Kingdom was the Niflheim, I think was I believe it was Niflheim, right? I believe that's the name of the city. I can't remember. I might have to look that up real quick. Yeah, it was Niflheim. I was playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and I was like, is it Niflheim, right? Or is that, yeah, it's Niflheim. Anyways, the warring nation of Niflheim, and pretty much how all of that was going to get together, I think was going to be very, very interesting. It seemed like the summons were going to be very important from the get-go. You had the mystery of why does Noctis' eyes turn red. Of course, in 15, it's supposed to be because whatever summon he uses, his eyes does that. And they really don't even go into story details on why that happens. At least I don't remember seeing anything that kind of says exactly why that happens to Noctis. That was just kind of there. So there was a lot of things that in 15 that was just missing that Versus 13 just seemed to be very, very, I don't know, like interesting. Not only that, going back to the combat aspect, there was a lot of other things going on. For example, being able to go ahead and control like their mechs, just jump in there and like shoot other soldiers and mechs, being able to control like turrets. The gameplay was a lot more diverse versus what we got. So there was a lot of great things happening with Versus 13 in terms of story, gameplay, so forth, that we just never got. And this is the game, the Final Fantasy game, that we will never get, unfortunately. Anytime anybody brings up Final Fantasy 15, my thoughts are automatically, this could have been an amazing game, but there was a lot of stuff left out. 15 was just broken up into way too many pieces. The whole invasion arc you had to watch a movie for, and the movie was like decent. A lot of the scenes that were in Versus 13, they just swapped it out and just created it for the movie. For example, when Noctis and Stella first meet each other and start talking, they changed it for Luna Freya. And I forgot what the guy is. The guy from the Kingsglaive, that's the main character in the movie. They changed it to him talking. I think his name was like Nix or Nixie, something like that. Like that whole part, I was like, man, like this was in the game. Why would you take it out? Just so many things were taken out. They went from that one button press versus what would have been like a Kingdom Hearts style. And it just felt like some weird decisions. Now, to be fair, I'm pretty sure Tabata, they told him, hey, we need this out in 2016, so do whatever you can, get this over with so we can get the game out. So he went to the most basic option he can. He took out maybe elements that weren't 100% done and turned that into the movie, turned out other elements into an anime and so forth. And I just don't understand why, right? We had to get DLC to kind of get better understanding of what was happening to Ignis, Prompto, and Gladio while Noctis was asleep. There was, you know, an episode Arden that we had to go to understand who Arden was and why he was here to begin with. There was supposed to be an episode Noctis that was going to kind of go ahead and go into a deeper dive. It just felt like a big mess, almost like Mass Effect 3. Like the Mass Effect 3 ending, a lot of people did not get a lot of closure. In this, even though there is like a set ending, there's still a lot of missing elements that are unexplained, and it's just sad. Like I wish Versus 13 would just, you know, somehow come out, right? Like even if it has to be a different game altogether, I wish it would come out. Or is it going to come out? And I say is it because there was a recent rumor, being like in the past couple of years, that Verum Rex, if you remember that from Kingdom Hearts 3, was going to be Nomura's attempt to create Final Fantasy Versus 13 but his own way. And this would be of course tied to the Kingdom Hearts franchise. But if you look at Verum Rex, a lot of people noted that this looked very similar to Versus 13, including the secret cutscene that you do get in Kingdom Hearts 3, where you have Yuzora, who's basically leaning against the window, kind of like sleeping, very similar to how Noctis was first introduced in Final Fantasy Versus 13 trailer. Not only that, the video you do see in the Toy Story world is very similar to what you see in just Versus 13 overall, and that got a lot of people excited. So I'm hoping that whatever story elements, any story, I don't know, beats that he was wanting in Versus 13 will come to a Verum Rex game, because I think that was just would be awesome. This is something that Nomura's passion was into. He wanted to make something different that isn't Kingdom Hearts, and it was that. And honestly, I think, I don't know, Nomura can make something golden. This could have been the Final Fantasy game that would have helped Final Fantasy, because Final Fantasy was going downhill in that era. 13 wasn't selling as much, even though 13.2 was better in my opinion. It still wasn't as popular. Then you had 14 that was a mess before it was remade into A Realm Reborn and so forth. 15 unfortunately didn't help out. While it did sell pretty good and people were kind of indifferent to it, it just wasn't as popular as older games. Of course, 7 Remake has definitely changed that, and of course everybody's hyped about Rebirth, 2 Nomura games by the way, because Nomura has been working on those. So I would hope for something like Verum Rex to come out, because I think there's a lot of potential there. Anyways, what do you think about Final Fantasy Versus 13? Are you disappointed that this game just never came out and never existed? Do you want to see that in Verum Rex? Like, what are your thoughts on Final Fantasy 15 as well? Did you really enjoy Final Fantasy 15? I'm not trying to say that I'm a hater of 15. I really do like the lore behind it. It's just one of those things that you get and you're like, man, this could have been a lot better. There was so much potential there that just is missing, that was just taken out. And that's really my disappointment with the game, is that I enjoyed 15. I enjoyed it a lot. The music, of course, Yoko Shimomura, chef's kiss. Music, great, amazing. But a lot of the story beats and just like a lot of the missing elements that were already shown off in Final Fantasy Versus 13 kind of make 15 feel like a letdown. So yeah, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Share the channel, it does help out a lot. Again, trying to hit a goal of 750 subscribers by the end of February. Hopefully 1,000 subscribers by the end of March. I would really appreciate every little bit, because every little bit does count. Thanks for watching. My name is James. I'll catch you guys next time.